When a woman leaves, most men panic. They become emotional, reactive, needy, and obsessive. They lose control over themselves, trying to regain control over her. And ironically, that is exactly what pushes her further away. The moment a woman starts becoming distant, most men react emotionally instead of intelligently. Their fear takes control of them. They begin overthinking every message, every delay, every change in her tone. And from that fear, they start chasing harder. They text more, call more, explain more, apologize more, and try desperately to fix something that cannot be repaired through pressure. What they fail to understand is that attraction does not grow when someone feels emotionally cornered. The more you chase a woman who is pulling away, the more you communicate one dangerous thing without even realizing it, that your emotional stability depends on her attention. And the moment someone feels responsible for your emotional survival, attraction begins to disappear. No woman wants to feel like she is carrying the weight of a man's self-worth on her shoulders. This is why silence becomes powerful, not because silence is manipulation, but because silence reveals emotional strength. When you stop chasing, you stop acting from panic. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop giving away your power in moments of emotional weakness. Most men believe that if they stop reaching out, the woman will forget them. But the opposite often happens. Constant chasing keeps you emotionally available in a way that lowers your value. Human psychology works strangely. People become curious about what no longer seeks them. They start questioning things when the noise disappears. The absence of your attention becomes louder than all the messages you were sending before. Suddenly, she notices the quiet. She notices the emotional space. And in that space, emotions become clearer. A man who constantly chases after rejection appears emotionally uncontrolled. His actions are driven by fear of loss rather than self-respect, and fear always weakens attraction. Think about it carefully. If someone has already asked for distance, but you continue forcing conversations, forcing explanations, forcing emotional talks, you are no longer trying to connect with them. You are trying to control their feelings. Nobody feels safe around emotional pressure. The more desperately you try to convince someone to stay, the more they feel the need to escape. This is why emotionally mature people know when to step back. They understand that real connection cannot be forced through panic. Stopping the chase also changes something inside you. It forces you to face yourself. Most people avoid silence because silence exposes emotional dependency. The moment you stop texting her every hour, you suddenly realize how much of your happiness was attached to her responses. That realization is painful, but it is also necessary, because a man who cannot sit peacefully with himself will always become emotionally reactive in relationships. Chasing often has nothing to do with love. It has everything to do with fear, ego, loneliness, and emotional addiction. Many men are not actually fighting for the relationship. They are fighting the discomfort of rejection. And because they cannot handle losing control, they lose themselves trying to regain someone else. When you stop chasing, you begin rebuilding your dignity. You begin remembering that your value does not decrease because someone walked away. You stop placing another human being at the center of your emotional identity. And this shift changes your entire energy. A calm man is powerful because he is not trying to force outcomes. He understands that what is meant for him will not require humiliation to keep. That kind of emotional discipline is rare today. Most people react instantly to pain. They seek validation immediately. They need reassurance constantly. But the man who can experience heartbreak without collapsing emotionally becomes unforgettable because his strength feels different from everyone else around her. One of the biggest reasons relationships begin to lose their spark is because people slowly abandon themselves while trying to hold on to someone else. In the beginning of a relationship, you had your own goals, your own discipline, your own identity, and your own sense of direction. You had standards for yourself. You cared about your future, your growth, your confidence, your health, and your purpose. But somewhere along the way, many men become emotionally consumed by the relationship itself. Their happiness starts depending entirely on one person's attention. Their mood changes according to her replies, her behavior, and her validation. Without realizing it, they slowly stop building their own life and begin orbiting around someone else's existence. And the moment this happens, attraction quietly starts dying because dependence replaces individuality. A woman is naturally drawn toward a man who has direction in life, not because of money or status alone, but because purpose creates energy. A man who is focused on improving himself carries a different presence. He speaks differently, walks differently, thinks differently, and handles emotions differently. But when a breakup happens, most men do the exact opposite of what they should do. Instead of rebuilding themselves, they become obsessed with watching her life. They spend hours checking social media, overanalyzing stories, stalking followers, rereading old conversations, and emotionally torturing themselves with memories. Their entire focus becomes external. They stop taking care of their body, their goals, their career, and their mental peace, because all their energy becomes trapped inside emotional obsession. And obsession destroys personal power. The reality is that heartbreak should become fuel, not destruction. Pain has the ability to transform a person if they stop running from it and start using it. This is why the smartest thing you can do after losing someone is to redirect your energy back into your own life. Go to the gym not to impress her, but because physical discipline rebuilds confidence. Work harder on your career because success creates stability and self-respect. Learn new skills because growth shifts your focus away from emotional suffering. Build routines. Wake up earlier. Read more. Spend time with people who inspire strength instead of weakness. The goal is not to distract yourself from pain temporarily. The goal is to evolve so deeply that your entire identity becomes stronger than the version of you that entered the relationship in the first place. What most people fail to understand is that confidence is not built through words. Confidence is built through evidence. When you keep promises to yourself, your self-respect grows naturally. Every workout completed, every goal achieved, every disciplined habit repeated sends a signal to your mind that you are capable, stable, and in control of your own life. This changes your emotional state completely. Instead of feeling abandoned, you begin feeling empowered. Instead of feeling empty, you begin feeling productive. And productive people suffer differently because purpose gives pain direction. There is also something psychologically powerful about becoming unavailable emotionally while improving yourself quietly. When someone leaves you expecting to see you broken, desperate, and emotionally destroyed, but instead they see growth, discipline, peace, and maturity, it creates curiosity. Most people expect emotional chaos after a breakup. Very few expect transformation, and transformation changes how people remember you. Instead of becoming the person who begged to be loved, you become the person who used pain as motivation to become stronger, calmer, healthier, and more focused. Your energy becomes impossible to ignore because people can sense when someone has rebuilt themselves from suffering instead of being destroyed by it. The moment a relationship begins falling apart, many people lose their emotional balance completely. Fear takes over their thinking, and suddenly they start behaving in ways they never imagined they would. They beg for another chance. They send emotional paragraphs at midnight. They repeatedly apologize for things that were never entirely their fault, and they try to convince someone to stay by sacrificing their own dignity. In their mind, they believe they are fighting for love, but what they are actually doing is fighting against rejection. There is a huge difference between the two. Love is built on mutual desire, mutual respect, and emotional freedom. Begging, on the other hand, comes from panic. It comes from the fear of abandonment and the inability to accept that someone may no longer choose you. The painful truth is that the more desperately you try to hold on to someone, the more emotionally exhausted they become around you. A woman may feel sympathy when she sees a man begging, crying uncontrollably, or emotionally collapsing, but sympathy should never be confused with attraction. Attraction requires emotional strength, self-respect, and confidence. The moment you place another human being above your own dignity, the entire dynamic changes. Your words begin carrying emotional pressure instead of emotional connection. Phrases like, "Please don't leave me," "I can't live without you," or "You are everything to me," may sound romantic in movies, but in reality, they communicate emotional dependency. And emotional dependency slowly destroys respect because it tells the other person that your identity cannot function without their presence. No healthy relationship can survive when one person becomes emotionally responsible for the other person's entire happiness. Most men do not realize how much damage desperation creates because they are too consumed by fear in the moment. They think that if they say enough emotional things, she will suddenly remember the good memories and stay. But emotions do not work like negotiations. You cannot pressure someone into genuine attraction. The more you beg someone to love you, the more unnatural the relationship becomes. Instead of feeling emotionally connected to you, they begin feeling emotionally trapped by your pain. This is why many people pull away even faster when they sense desperation. They no longer feel freedom inside the relationship. They feel guilt, pressure, and responsibility, and nobody wants love to feel like emotional obligation. There is also a deeper psychological issue behind begging that many people avoid facing. When someone begs for love, they are usually trying to escape the pain of feeling unworthy. Rejection forces people to confront insecurities they have ignored for years. Suddenly they feel replaceable, unwanted, and not good enough. Instead of healing those insecurities internally, they desperately seek reassurance externally. They want the other person to choose them again so they can feel valuable again. But this creates a dangerous cycle because your self-worth becomes dependent on someone else's decision. The moment another person controls your value, you lose emotional power over your own life. Emotionally strong people understand something that emotionally desperate people do not. You cannot force someone to recognize your value through suffering. Real value is recognized naturally. If someone truly wants to walk away, allowing them to leave peacefully is one of the strongest things you can do. It shows emotional maturity. It shows self-control. It shows that while you may love deeply, you will never abandon yourself in the process of loving someone else. There is dignity in accepting reality calmly instead of fighting it through emotional chaos. A man who respects himself understands that love should be freely given, not emotionally demanded. He understands that begging may temporarily keep someone around physically, but it will never make them stay emotionally. And relationships without genuine emotional desire eventually collapse under the weight of resentment, exhaustion, and imbalance. One of the greatest mistakes people make after a breakup is refusing to let the other person truly feel their absence. The moment distance appears, they panic and immediately try to fill every second of silence with messages, calls, explanations, and emotional reactions. They become so afraid of being forgotten that they never allow the other person to actually experience what life feels like without them. But human beings often fail to appreciate something fully when it is constantly available. Familiarity can quietly reduce emotional awareness. When your attention, presence, and energy are always accessible, no matter how poorly someone treats you, your value slowly becomes normalized in their mind. They stop feeling the emotional impact of losing you because emotionally you never truly left. This is why stepping back is so important. Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as emotional reality. People need space to think clearly. When emotions are constantly interrupted by pressure and communication, clarity becomes impossible. Most relationships end with emotional noise everywhere. Arguments, explanations, accusations, emotional breakdowns, and desperate attempts to repair things instantly. In that chaos, nobody truly processes what they are losing. But silence changes that. Silence removes distraction, silence forces reflection, and reflection is where emotional truth begins revealing itself. When a woman no longer has constant access to you, something psychologically shifts. The routines connected to your presence begin disappearing, the messages stop, the emotional comfort stops, the predictability stops, and suddenly there is empty space where your energy used to exist. That is when comparison begins naturally. She starts remembering the things she once overlooked because they are no longer available to her every day. Human beings often understand value more deeply through absence than through presence. This is why many people only realize how important someone was after the relationship ends. It is not because love suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It is because distance created perspective. Most men sabotage this process because they cannot tolerate uncertainty. The silence makes them uncomfortable, so they interrupt it constantly. They send unnecessary texts just to feel connected again. They create fake reasons to reach out. They check on her emotionally every few days, hoping to remain present in her mind. But what they fail to understand is that emotional availability after rejection weakens the impact of absence completely. If she can still receive your attention whenever she wants, then she never fully experiences losing you. Your energy remains accessible, and accessible things rarely create emotional urgency. There is also something deeply powerful about walking away peacefully instead of emotionally collapsing. Most people expect anger, begging, emotional drama, or attempts to force reconciliation. Very few expect calmness. Very few expect emotional discipline. And when someone sees that you respected their decision enough to step away without creating chaos, it leaves a lasting impression because emotional maturity is rare. A man who can accept pain without becoming bitter, obsessive, or manipulative immediately separates himself from emotionally reactive people. His silence feels different because it is not empty silence. It is controlled silence. It communicates self-respect without needing words. Allowing her to experience life without you also gives you the opportunity to reconnect with yourself. Many people become so focused on holding on to another person that they lose connection with their own identity. The distance forces you to rebuild emotional independence. It teaches you how to find peace without constant reassurance. It teaches you how to exist without chasing validation. And ironically, the less emotionally dependent you become, the more attractive your energy becomes naturally. Because emotionally independent people create calmness around them instead of pressure. The truth is, people rarely miss what never leaves them alone. Constant presence removes emotional contrast. But when your energy disappears completely, your absence begins speaking on your behalf. The conversations she once ignored become memories. The effort she once overlooked becomes noticeable. The emotional stability she once took for granted becomes difficult to replace. And in that silence, she begins experiencing the full emotional reality of a life where you are no longer part of her daily world. One of the most attractive qualities any person can possess is emotional stability. Not because it looks impressive on the surface, but because emotional control creates a sense of strength that people naturally feel around you. In today's world, most individuals react instantly to emotions. The moment they feel pain, rejection, jealousy, insecurity, or disappointment, they lose control over themselves completely. Their emotions begin controlling their behavior, their decisions, and even their self-worth. This is why breakups destroy so many people mentally. They are not only grieving the loss of a relationship, they are confronting the fact that their emotional foundation was never stable to begin with. The relationship had become the source of their identity, validation, peace, and happiness. So when it disappears, they collapse internally because they never learned how to remain emotionally grounded on their own. An emotionally unshakable man is different. He still feels pain deeply, but he does not allow pain to control his actions. He understands that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent definitions of who he is. Most people think emotional strength means becoming cold, detached, or emotionless, but that is not true. Suppressing emotions is not strength. Pretending not to care is not strength. Real emotional power is the ability to feel everything fully without losing your composure. It means you can experience heartbreak without becoming desperate, experience rejection without becoming bitter, and experience uncertainty without panicking. This level of self-control is rare because most people are addicted to emotional reactions. They speak impulsively, text impulsively, and make decisions impulsively whenever emotions become intense. When a woman leaves, emotionally weak men often become unstable immediately. Their mood changes every hour depending on whether she replies or ignores them. One moment they are angry, the next moment they are begging, then blaming, then apologizing, then trying to reconnect emotionally again. This inconsistency reveals inner chaos. It communicates that their emotions are controlling them instead of the other way around. And while some women may feel sympathy for this behavior, sympathy is not respect. Respect comes from emotional maturity. Respect comes from watching someone handle pain with calmness instead of emotional destruction. An emotionally unshakable man does not chase emotional validation because his sense of worth is not dependent on another person's approval. This is what makes his energy different. He does not need constant reassurance to feel secure. He does not panic when someone becomes distant because he understands that his value remains intact regardless of another person's choices. Most people become emotionally reactive because rejection activates deep insecurities inside them. It makes them feel abandoned, unworthy, or replaceable. Instead of managing those emotions internally, they seek relief externally by demanding attention, explanations, or reassurance from the person pulling away. But emotionally strong people know that no amount of external validation can permanently heal internal insecurity. This kind of emotional discipline changes every interaction you have after a breakup. Instead of trying to force someone to understand your pain, you quietly process it yourself. Instead of reacting emotionally to every situation, you become more observant and controlled. Your silence feels peaceful rather than wounded. Your presence feels grounded rather than needy. And people notice this difference immediately because emotional calmness has a magnetic effect in a world filled with emotional chaos. There is also a deeper reason emotional stability becomes attractive. It creates emotional safety. People naturally trust individuals who remain calm under pressure because stability feels reliable. A man who loses control every time life becomes difficult creates emotional exhaustion around him. But a man who remains composed during painful situations creates confidence around him. His energy feels secure because he is secure within himself. He no longer behaves like someone terrified of loss. He behaves like someone who understands that pain is part of life, rejection is part of life, and emotional suffering should never become an excuse to abandon self-respect, self-control, or inner peace. One of the deepest forms of emotional freedom comes from accepting that you cannot force anyone to stay in your life. Most people spend relationships living in constant fear of loss. They become anxious whenever the other person changes slightly, becomes distant, replies differently, or behaves unpredictably. That fear slowly controls everything. It controls how they speak, how they react, how much they tolerate, and how much of themselves they sacrifice just to avoid abandonment. They begin walking on emotional eggshells because they believe losing the relationship would destroy them completely. And ironically, this fear is exactly what weakens attraction over time. Fear creates pressure. Fear creates emotional dependency. Fear makes people act desperate, insecure, controlling, and emotionally unstable. The moment someone realizes you are terrified of losing them, the balance of the relationship begins shifting because your actions stop coming from confidence and start coming from survival. This is why being willing to lose someone is one of the most powerful psychological shifts a person can make. It does not mean you stop loving them. It does not mean you become cold or emotionally detached. It means you stop abandoning yourself out of fear. You stop believing that another human being is the source of your entire happiness, identity, or emotional stability. Most people do not understand the difference between loving someone and needing someone. Love is healthy when it exists alongside self-respect and emotional independence. Neediness begins when your emotional survival becomes attached to another person's presence. And the moment that happens, your behavior changes completely. You tolerate disrespect you would normally never accept. You stay silent about things that hurt you. You overcompensate, constantly trying to prove your worth. You chase harder after rejection because the thought of losing them feels unbearable. A man who is willing to lose someone behaves differently because he no longer operates from panic. He understands that no relationship is worth destroying his dignity for. He understands that if someone truly wants to leave, forcing them to stay will only create resentment and emotional exhaustion. Instead of trying to control outcomes desperately, he focuses on controlling himself. His peace no longer depends on another person choosing him every day. And this emotional stability changes his entire energy. He becomes calmer, less reactive, and more grounded because fear is no longer driving his actions. Most attraction disappears when people sense emotional desperation. Desperation communicates scarcity. It tells the other person that you do not believe you can survive emotionally without them. But emotional confidence communicates abundance. It shows that while you may deeply care about the relationship, you are still capable of standing alone if necessary. This is what creates respect. A man who can accept loss without collapsing emotionally becomes incredibly difficult to manipulate because his identity remains intact, regardless of external circumstances. There is also something psychologically magnetic about someone who is not trying to force connection. Most people are used to emotional chasing. They are used to people begging for attention, demanding reassurance, and fighting desperately to avoid separation. But when someone responds to pain with calm acceptance instead of emotional chaos, it creates a completely different emotional experience. Suddenly, there is no pressure, no manipulation, and no desperation. There is simply quiet confidence. And confidence often leaves a stronger emotional impact than emotional intensity ever could. Being willing to lose her also forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth about yourself, whether you truly love her or whether you simply fear loneliness. Many people confuse attachment with love because they have never learned how to exist peacefully alone. They cling to relationships not because the connection is healthy, but because being abandoned triggers feelings of emptiness, insecurity, and emotional insufficiency. But when you become genuinely comfortable with yourself, relationships stop feeling like emotional survival. They become choices instead of dependencies. You no longer chase people who are uncertain about you because you understand your value is not determined by another person's ability to recognize it. And once you stop fearing loss, you stop radiating the anxious energy that pushes people away in the first place,